Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. This is not the first time. I was invited by LilYemen to Sheffield, and time was the first time, and my heart leaped up because I'm doing, as an activist here in the UK, I've been doing it in Yemen, and I'm a recent person for the UK. I just came last year, and I thought I'm getting my position back. I'm doing, as an activist here also in the UK, and I'm given the chance. These ladies just opened the door for me. Thank you very much for bringing me here again. Anyway, I prepared the slides, but I'm not going to stop at every slide. First of all, because most of the knowledge had been said by the ladies here, the activists here, and the profession. Also, I was thinking, when I was preparing the slides, I was thinking of the audience, and I can see the audience, most of you are aware about the issue of child marriage. But I'm going to go through it very quickly, but I'll stop at some points to few slides, because I've heard a person here mentioning that it is a crime. Yes, it is a crime, and I'm going to say why it is a crime. First of all, you can see the picture of these two girls married to these two adults, and we can see the age difference between them, and it tells us a lot. This picture was taken by National Geographic, sent as Stephanie St. Clair. She's a very famous photographer worldwide. She came to the Yemen to cover many stories about child marriage, and she has been alerted by the story of Nujud. Why we want to end child marriage? Of course, it has its negative impacts. It is human rights violation, exposure to violence and exploitation, denial of girls' education, high risk to death. Oops. I'm not good at technology. I always have an assistant to do that, sorry. Why girls are forced to marriage? It is gender inequality. Girls are viewed much down comparing to the males in the families. When the family have an issue, for instance, poverty issue, they do the best to get rid of the girls in the family. They think that this will make them reduce the poverty that the family struggle with. It's also poverty, negative traditional and religious practices, and we always say that religion has nothing to do with child marriage. It's just the misinterpretation of Islam or whatever. Law enforcement, inefficiency, and corruption. Why I'm saying corruption? Because the agreements are made by just people, has nothing to do with law. He's a person in the community that they trust. They ask him to do the contract for the marriage. And if something goes wrong, this person cannot be prosecuted. So corruption is involved in Yemeni's life, and we are sorry about that, but we have to mention it all the time. For example, when Nujud wanted to get her divorce, it was very difficult for Shada to do that because there's no law that Shada can rely on. Also, she was also worried if corruption will get involved when the procedures of the divorce was about to end. She had to pay from her pocket $50,000 just to make the divorce to happen immediately. Child marriage is forced marriage. It is forced because any child is not able to make a fully informed choice of marriage. Child involved usually lacks the capacity to give full consent. Child marriage always involves force, pressure, or coercion. We have some statistics that I can emphasize what Afra had presented before. And I heard Dr. Olak, he raised the data question. We cannot ignore the data, although we always find data, the data sometimes differs from one place, from one resource to another. But at the end, we have to use data, because it's all estimation. But this data is close to the reality, because the majority of the population in Yemen live in rural area, like 70 to 75% of the population live in rural areas. The data here says, born as a female in Yemen, a 50 chance of living in absolute poverty, a 70 chance of being illiterate, and an 80 chance of never holding a paid job, a 1 in 19 chance of dying in childbirth. Half of all women marry before 15, and 3/4 before the age of 18. Do you agree with this data? It's estimated, but it is close to the reality, we can say. Child marriage is it's one phase of human trafficking. That's why we call it crime. As young girls, no say in arrangement, and after marriage, they often face sexual and physical abuse by their husbands. As money changes in hands, in this case, though, it is selling, dowry is involved in the hands of the parents. The pressure comes from the family of the husband to have a free domestic labor, new worker in the house or on the farm. You know that the males in Yemen are forced to marry to bring a labor to the family because the mother is old, because the farm, the labor in the family is limited, so they need to add more labor to the family. But I cannot say, I'm not assuming here that the parents are traffickers, but the way that they behave, it shows that what they do is wrong, but they don't understand. It's about ignorance. What they do is wrong, but they don't know that they are doing a wrong thing to their children. What is human trafficking, if we want to compare it? The persons being taken, deceived, or taken against their will, bought, sold, and exploited. And in the second slide, I mentioned exploitation. Girls are exposed to exploitation. And this is human trafficking. Human trafficking, the other phase of human trafficking is exploitation. People are trafficked to be exploited, that's it. It is a trade in humans, most commonly for the purpose of sexual slavery, forced labor, or commercial sexual prostitution, or for providing a spouse in the context of forced marriage. It does not necessarily have to involve the movement of persons, because the definition of human trafficking involves the movement of persons, that it is called transitional crime, moving people from one country to another, or from one place to another. But it also happened within the same place. It could happen within the same place. When I've worked before I came to the UK, I've worked with the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. And it was very difficult to even use the term trafficking in Yemen. I remember in 2010, we had a workshop to launch the project. And the Ministry of Labor, she said, you got to change the banners because you are using the term that we don't agree with. You know that Yemen has signed the Palermo protocol to prevent child trafficking, human trafficking, or trafficking in person, particularly women and children. They signed the protocol, but it's not ratified by the government because it involves child trafficking forced marriage. That's the reason why they are still holding back the ratification. And we changed the term, human trafficking in Yemen is always associated with smuggling. They rather to use smuggling because Yemen is famous with smuggling issue rather than trafficking issue. Child marriage in Yemen, commonly and most practiced in the Arab countries. It's #1 in Arab countries. It has been always a silent and a taboo issue until 2005, following lobbying from the governmental and non-governmental women organization with support from the international community. Otherwise, nobody will bring, I don't think the organization in Yemen will give funding. I mean, the government in Yemen will give funding to any organization to fight child marriage because the government doesn't have, there's no political will to stop the issue. Resistant to ending child marriage, attitudes, beliefs include protection of chastity and family honor. This is the reason that they wanted the resistance. Lack of awareness and ignorance of the negative health impacts, young girls' pregnancy and childbirth. Poverty and girls being viewed as an economic liability by some families. They marry off their children because they want to get some money. And Shada has mentioned Arwa, and I've seen Arwa. I went to Eb to bring her. She's a girl who lives in Eb with her family. She's from very, very, very poor family. You cannot imagine how poor they are. And she was sold for 120 pounds for the family to eat. Of course, the money gone in 1 week, and the girl was stuck with that man. He was like 3-4 times older than her, and she spent 7 months with him struggling with, of course, lots of pain. And we brought her to Sana'a, and I took her to my house. I had to host her in my house, and when I had to bring her back, to send her back to her family, she cried. She said, "Don't take me back, because I don't know what will happen. But I don't have any legal base that I can keep her with me. Of course, I'm not a guardian. I don't have that. So I had to send her, and she was crying by that time." Efforts to end child marriage. There were national efforts, women's organization advocacy and campaigns, highlighted the issue in the Gender Development Strategy and in the MDG's document, as it is one of the issues that hinders back the progress of the MDG. We cannot achieve MDG while we have half of the children in, the statistics in Yemen that half of the population are young, and the population from 0 to 15, it's quite high, could be quarter of the population. Can you imagine? I mean, how big is this community? They can be very good human resources, but they are not used. Campaigning and advocacy against tourism marriages. Have you heard of tourism marriages in Yemen? And the victims were girls. They were sold out to the visitors came from the Gulf countries. Exactly, Saudis and from wherever, from the Gulf countries. So they were really sold, and that issue was raised by the Women National Committee as a governmental body to the Prime Minister, and they have done something about it, and they put some restriction. My time is finished? I have to finish it very quickly.
Sorry,
are you interested?
The audience are interested.
Yes. So, campaigning and advocating to amend the legislation and laws to set 17 the minimum age for marriage. This was one of the campaigns that already mentioned. International effort, of course, UNICEF always supported national NGOs to improve the human rights of children. Save the Children, also the same, it is for protection of children. Oxfam campaign, End Child Marriage. This is what, in 2005, they started saying it's early marriage, and that term faced resistance from many in the community because they say, no, you cannot speak about early marriage. It's a taboo. It was still taboo by that time. And then they became smart. They, of course, discussed it with their local organizations. There were 17 local organizations beside the Yemeni Women National Committee, and they agreed to have safe age for marriage. That was more acceptable. It has, sometimes we have to play with the language to make it more acceptable to the communities. So when they used the term safe age for marriage, it was more acceptable, and they covered that campaign in 2 areas. It was in Hadramaut and in Al-Hudaydah. It was more successful in Hadramaut because they provided education to the girls. The families sometimes tell you, okay, we will not marry off our girls. What else are they going to do in home? Because there are no schools. We have bylaw. All our children are supposed to go to school, but not every child goes to school because the law is not implemented. It's not a matter to have a law on paper. It's how to implement the laws. It has to be both laws and campaigning. I mean, we have to raise the awareness of people that it is an issue.
Sorry, man, you are well over your time now.
Okay,
I'd love to hear.
I think